Welcome to this edition of Rattling the Bars, a show that amplifies the voices of people who are disenfranchised, marginalized, and subjugated while offering solutions. I'm your host, Mansa Musa. Today, we're going to talk about the current state of Wisconsin prison, the people incarcerated in them, and we're going to be talking with our guest, Mark Rice. Mark spent 26 months incarcerated in the Wisconsin prison system and 8 years under the supervision of the Wisconsin Department of Correction. His experience with the state carceral system inspired him to become a leader in the movement to dismantle this unjust system. Today, he serves as the coordinator of the Wisconsin Transformational Justice Campaign at the grassroots network Wisdom. This campaign aims to advance racial justice, decarcerate Wisconsin, and redirect resources away from the prison industrial complex and into building safer, stronger, and healthier community. Welcome to Rattling the Bars.
Thanks for the invitation.
Let's unpack this conversation by first briefly telling our audience about what's currently going on within the prison system.
Right now, what's going on in the prison system in the state of Wisconsin is a human rights crisis. At least 2 prisons in the state have been on lockdown now for nearly a year, and it's having a devastating impact on people who are incarcerated in those 2 prisons. One is Waupun Correctional Institution. The other is Green Bay Correctional Institution. There have been other prisons as well that have been impacted by lockdowns, but most of the attention has been on Green Bay and Waupun. So we're talking about people have been locked in cells for 23 hours a day, sometimes 4 hours a day, getting meals in their cells. They've had programming totally disrupted. The most basic of human needs have been taken away, have been limited or completely taken away. So there have been no in-person visits. They've had recreation taken away or extremely limited. There's been a lack of access to medical care, lack of access to psychological services, to treatment programming, educational programming, and even showers have been limited. So we're talking about, like I said, the most basic human needs are taken away. And Wisconsin has a problem with overpopulation in the prisons. There's not a problem with understaffing, it's overpopulation. So
That's right.
There's many ways that Wisconsin can reduce the prison population that policymakers are refusing to move forward. There's many different ways. The state legislature has many ways to reduce the prison population. Governor Evers can use his executive authority to bring down the population. He can commute sentences. The Department of Corrections has authority over some of the areas, like they can stop sending people back for technical violations.
Right.
So there's some really common sense policy changes that they can move forward to bring down the population. And if the population was brought down, then there would be no lockdowns. So one of the primary root causes of the lockdowns is having so many people needlessly being incarcerated for too long, excessive sentences. And there's a huge amount of racial injustice within Wisconsin system. By some measures, Wisconsin detains Black people and Indigenous people at a higher rate than any other state. So some of the neighborhoods in Milwaukee, by some statistical measures, are the most incarcerated neighborhoods ever in the United States. In Milwaukee, there's a zip code 53206, which is predominantly Black, that has the highest incarceration rate of any zip code in the United States by some measures. And so there's a lot of change that's really urgently needed in this state, for sure.
All right, let's talk about, let's go and examine these 2 institutions in the state of Wisconsin. Are both of these institutions maximum security?
Yes.
Okay, now, in terms of the reason why they've been on lockdown so long is because their claim is understaffed, but as you articulated, it's not understaffed, it's overpopulated. How long have this been going on in terms of them utilizing this particular excuse to basically turn these institutions into control units? How long have they been using this excuse?
Over 8 months now. It's almost a year going on, and definitely long-term lockdowns are torture. And definitely there's been suicides. And we work with a lot of folks who have loved ones currently incarcerated in Wisconsin prisons. So we've launched an entire campaign to challenge what's going on within the Wisconsin state prison system. So we have a campaign called In the Lockdowns campaign,
Mm-hmm.
and led by formerly incarcerated people and people who have loved ones who are currently incarcerated and being impacted by the lockdowns. And so there's been stories of suicides. It's led to suicides. Like I said, it's having a devastating impact on people psychologically. And definitely it's the root cause is the overpopulation. And that's
Right.
something that Wisdom, I work for an organization called Wisdom in Wisconsin. And one of our goals for a long time has been to cut the state's prison population in half. And so we actually have a policy agenda that lays out how Wisconsin can do this. So on the front end, Wisconsin can expand treatment alternatives to incarceration. There's a program,
Right.
treatment alternatives and diversions in Wisconsin, which is really underfunded, underutilized, which can get people out on the front end, could divert thousands of people from even going in the first place. There's some in-prison issues. There's some people who are sentenced under the old law in Wisconsin are still eligible for parole. So there's almost 2,000 people who've been incarcerated for over 20 years now and just got really long, excessive sentences with the expectation that they would be given a fair chance to be released under parole. But then parole essentially shut down in Wisconsin after Wisconsin's went to truth and sentencing in the year 2000. And so that's another way that people can be given early release through parole. We also have an earned release program for people who are sentenced under truth and sentencing, where they can participate in programming and get time taken off of their sentences by participating in that program. That program is really underfunded, underutilized. There's a compassionate release program that
Right.
will having health problems can be released, and that's underutilized. On the
Let,
back end,
uh,
there's thousands of people going back for technical violations for no
right. I
reason.
know. I know.
The fact
Let me
where,
answer this here then. Why, based on this common sense approach and as you had just outlined,
Mhm.
why is it such an apprehension to invest in the ideas and the policies and the programs that you just outlined? Two, where are most of these? Where are these two particular institutions located? Are they located in urban part of the, Wisconsin, or are they located in the rural part of Wisconsin?
Waupun is located in rural Wisconsin. Green Bay is in Green Bay, which is a somewhat urban area. It's located right in the city of Green Bay.
Right.
And so there's definitely been some momentum around closing them. I think people are starting to realize that these prisons need to be closed because they're so old. Both of them were built over 100 years ago and they're falling apart. And it's going to become extremely expensive to keep them open, to put it in the resources needed to renovate those places to
Right.
keep them so that people continue to, it's not going to be a good investment to even keep these places open. So I think that's part of the conversation that people start to, but we also have to, there's also some who want to build new prisons. So there's some in the legislatures, particularly Republicans, who want to close Green Bay down, and they want to do economic development projects on that land where it sits, but then they also want to build a new prison. So that's the fight that we have as well, is we have to stop the construction of a new prison and get people to realize that by implementing some of these common sense policy changes that
Mm-hmm.
are about, simply there's 5,200 people in Wisconsin prisons for revocation without a new conviction, sent back for violating the
Right.
rules, no new
Technical
technical
violations. Yeah.
violation.
Yeah. But okay. Let me ask you this here. Why again? Why the state of Wisconsin is not investing in the common sense approaches that you outlined? Like, for example, I read where the number one thing that they utilizing is because so many people are on parole and probation, they utilizing technical violations uh, to get people back in the system. And they have, I think they say only release like 5.28% people a year. What is it about? What is it about the state of Wisconsin's attitude to be so intransigent about recognizing the need to become more objective, and it would be more cost efficient, because right now they saying $1.5 billion is being uh, allocated towards the prison system. 1.5 billion could be allocated. You could take that money, allocate towards schools, education, hospitals, employment, uh, and also investing in some of the things that you say that you talked about. Why do you think why is it that the state of Wisconsin is so adamant about not investing in eliminating and eradicating the overpopulation of the prison system?
For one thing, there's definitely financial incentive. There's definitely a lot of corporations, a lot of companies making money off the system. As you know,
Mm-hmm.
people, they're charging people really outrageous prices for phone calls, for
Mm-hmm.
food. There's the financial incentive. A lot of powerful interests want to maintain the status quo, keep that going to ensure that they're continuing to make money off the system. The status quo within the Department of Corrections has been really powerful. There's many people who are administrators in the Department of Corrections that have been there for years, for
Mm-hmm.
decades, and are really resistant to any sort of change to a better approach. And then there's the political as well. So there's still legislators in the state. It's a very gerrymandered state. So I mean,
Right.
it's one of the most gerrymandered states. And there's been politicians who built their careers off of increasing incarceration rates, on building more prisons. And so that's part of it. I think a central piece of it is the dehumanization of people who've been convicted of crimes. There's definitely, I feel like they cannot treat people like this and incarcerate people at the rate that they're doing without dehumanizing them first. So I feel like that's a central part of the work that we do, is working to change and challenge the narratives that are really dehumanizing people with conviction records. I feel like that's central. The more that we can get our stories out, and many
Right.
of us are out in the community flourishing. Many of us have done years in prison. I've been incarcerated myself. Many of my colleagues have been incarcerated for a long time. But when we were given a chance to get back out and get in the community and we're provided with support services, and many of us are now flourishing in the community. And the more that we can get those stories out to really challenge those narratives, those stereotypes that people have of those who've been through the system, then that's going to change things for the better. So I feel like that's a central part of the work. And then we need to change the overall narrative as well, that there's still that narrative out there, which is really powerful to change. It's hard to change, is that many people in the state still believe that building more prisons and filling them up is keeping us safer. And it's not. We know that we
Right.
actually
Right.
create safety by investing in jobs, investing in healthcare, housing. And so really need to reimagine the entire system and the way resources are allocated in the state. And that starts with cutting back on spending on this. So for far too long, the state has relied on really courts, prisons, police as responses to some of these problems. But instead, it's really time to start reallocating those resources, putting them, especially in the neighborhoods that have been most harmed by incarceration, especially
Right.
Black and brown neighborhoods, indigenous communities across Wisconsin, really start investing in those neighborhoods that have been most impacted by incarceration, most neglected over time, and those resources into programs and services we know are going to create public safety. And there's a lot of these initiatives now are being led by formerly incarcerated people as well. We have a lot of organizations in Wisconsin that are led by people who've been through the system, that now have
Right. Right.
profit organizations that really know how to do this in a way that's really going to help people flourish in the community. So the more that we can really invest in those organizations that are led by directly impacted people, that are providing the services, that are working to change the system, that's going to really help to start to shift this and change things for the better.
Talk about okay, so talk about y'all strategy going forward in terms of because now we recognize that based on what you're saying, that it's overpopulation, it's not a lack of staffing. So the fact that they want to you bring the National Guard in to oversee the population, uh, one, address whether or not that if that do in fact take shape, is that going to allow for the two institutions that you talked about to become open back up and allow the men to be able to have like their basic human rights acknowledged, uh, or and two, what's going forward? What is y'all strategy in terms of how y'all intend on getting the state of Wisconsin to recognize uh, that it's more cost efficient to invest in people's getting out and staying out as opposed to chasing people that's out, running them down and putting them back in to maintain the count.
The first priority for us is that we're working to get immediate decarceration to happen. And we know Governor Evers has the authority to immediately bring down the prison population by using his commutation powers. So in an emergency
Mm-hmm.
situation like this, there's definitely a need for them to start using those powers. The Department of Corrections has the ability to also immediately reduce the prison population. And they did that during the beginning of the COVID crisis in Wisconsin
Right.
prisons. Wisconsin Secretary the DOC Secretary Kevin Carr, he brought down the population by 1,200 people with one policy change. He put forward this policy change to release people who were in for technical violations, and that led to one prison that we were working to close down, Milwaukee Secure Detention Facility. The
Mm-hmm.
population at that prison was cut by more than half during COVID, but they started to reverse back to normal policies and practices over the last year, and the population started coming back up. So that's the priority right now, is to get the population down, and then there would be no need to bring in the National Guard. If they brought down the population, they could actually close down Waupun Correctional Institution. They could close down Green Bay Correctional Institution
Right.
by immediately bringing the population down. So Governor Evers, we definitely need him to step up. You start using his commutation powers. And he ran on a platform when he first ran for governor. He promised to work with us to cut the state's prison population in half. There's been very little follow through on that. And so
Right.
now is the time we feel that he really needs to step up and start following through with that promise and to use the executive authority that he has to do that. And the Department of Corrections can cut way down on the number of people who are being sent back for supervision violations, for crimeless revocations, we call it in Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm.
And also they have they also have the power to immediately end lockdowns as well. There's definitely the capacity, even without even immediately before those changes are made, they can immediately reduce in the lockdowns without that. And so then return, because there's definitely no logical explanation, no
Yeah,
reason
justification.
to
Yeah.
take away people's basic services and needs. That should
Right.
never be disrupted. People should always have access to showers, in-person visits, to educational programming, medical care that they need, psychological care. That should never be taken away in any circumstances. And the state has the responsibility to care for people who are incarcerated, and they're not doing
Right.
it in
And
a
and and
lawsuit
uh
in Waupun
and
right now. They're facing a
and
lawsuit, but
the
we know that
reality
definitely.
is, it's
I'm
not to
sorry.
cut you off, but the reality is this is a Eighth Amendment violation. It's cruel and unusual punishment because now I'm being punished. I got a sentence. I'm doing my time, but now I'm being punished not because of an incident that took place in the institutions. I was locked up 48 years prior to being released, and I've been in institutions where we've been locked down like 8, 9 months on end. But in most cases, you could trace it back to some type of incident or some type of problem going on in the environment that they could justify locking us down. Just to say they lock us down because with the population's overcrowded and you claiming that you don't have enough staff, that's in and of itself is cruel and unusual, and the explanation shouldn't even wash. But talk about the from what from what you've been able to gather in terms of the people that's locked in these environments. How are they how are they responding? You mentioned earlier about suicide rate, but how are they responding in overall, and more importantly, how is it impacting the families?
It's really having a devastating impact on people who are incarcerated right now. We've been hearing that a lot of people are becoming suicidal. A lot of people are having problems with their mental health. And a lot of people have not been able to get access to medical care that they need to survive. And so one of the leaders who's been involved with the campaign, her name is Megan Kolb. Her father actually committed suicide in
Mm,
Waupun Correctional Institution, and he was there during the lockdown right as it was starting, but also got put on in solitary confinement on top of that. And he was, they have records now that he was denied several medications that he needed over
Mm-hmm.
time. He was diagnosed with serious mental illness, had several health problems. It was denied for months. He was not given access to medication that he needed, and ended up hanging himself while he was in solitary confinement. And so she's been involved to really lift up the impact that it's had on her and her family, how devastating that experience was, and is really working to hold Governor Evers accountable. Governor Evers actually called 2023 the year of mental health, that he was going to push forward mental health initiatives. And then there was something like this happens that's totally in contradiction with that. So mental health has to extend to not only people who are outside, but also to people who are incarcerated. And so, I mean, there's this language that they use there, they've changed, call people who are incarcerated people under their care, which I feel is not accurate. I feel like
Yeah,
that's
sanitize. Yeah,
oppressive term,
sanitize.
it's
Yeah.
oppressive, that's kind of pushing forward a narrative of, benevolent owner of
Yeah, yeah.
enslaved
That's why I say
people. And
sanitize is.
there's a lack of care too. So definitely
Yeah,
we're pushing back against that.
yeah.
Definitely want humanizing language, people that definitely call people, but the people under our care piece, when they add that under our care, it becomes a oppressive term. So, but also there's others that are involved right now. There's who still have loved ones who are in there. They're really worried as well that some of their loved ones have become suicidal, and they're worried that their loved ones could be next to where there could be another tragedy happening. And so we're hearing from people all the time, and it's really there's a sense of urgency, and that's why we've been taking
Yeah, I
so much
agree. I
action. We've been
agree.
doing really organizing actions and community forums almost on a weekly basis in Wisconsin, due to the fact of what we're hearing from people who are personally impacted. And then we also have many people who've been incarcerated in these places themselves, so they know exactly what's going
Right,
on.
right.
We're stepping up. There's several organizations like Expo, ex-incarcerated people organizing in Wisconsin, who's been really stepping up. Some of their leaders, many of their staff people and leaders have been incarcerated in Green Bay and Waupun. And so one of our organizers from Madison, he actually was, thinking, contemplating suicide while he was locked up in Waupun Correctional Institution. So I feel like we really have people who understand and empathize due to their personal experience of being incarcerated in those places. And it's really important for the work to be led by those who are most impacted, and
Right.
also the strategies to be developed by those who've been most impacted. I feel like that's what we're really doing and pushing this out
Let me
by.
ask you this here. And as we close out, what what can our audience, anyone that want to get involved with this fight to get some justice and some relief for the men that's locked up in these on these plantations, how can they get involved in terms of like helping y'all get the word out, but more importantly, changing the conditions that the men and women, the men are now being subjected to.
Definitely. They can check out our website, wisdomwisconsin.org. Definitely, you can sign up. There's information about the Transformational Justice Campaign of Wisdom. Definitely sign up and get on the email list to get more information. And we're on social media as well, on Facebook, on X, on several other platforms. I'm on several platforms myself under Ricer Mark,
Hmm.
RICERMARK. You can find me on X, on Facebook, on LinkedIn. Definitely reach out, connect with me on those platforms. We have community forums coming up in Wisconsin. There's going to be one in Madison, Wisconsin, February 1st, 6 p.m. There, it can get you more information about that. And then we had a forum recently in Milwaukee, and our format is we're really focusing on engaging directly with elected officials now. We're inviting
Right.
state representatives to come to these forums, and we're giving people a chance to share testimonies, 3-minute long testimonies about anything related to the lockdown. So a lot of people who've been directly impacted are showing up, sharing these testimonies. We had the one in Milwaukee. I talked to one person afterwards, and he said, after hearing all these testimonies, there's no way anyone could support continuing these lockdowns, because they heard about the suicides, the devastating impact it's had on people and families. And so I feel like it's very important to hear from those who are being impacted and their loved ones. And these community forums are providing a platform for that to happen, but also we're taking it to people who have the power to make the changes. So picking it to Department of Corrections administrators, to
Right.
the governor's office, to state legislators. And we're going to be having some meetings with the governor's policy advisors, with the Department of Corrections coming up, and definitely need people, as many people as possible. We need them to reach out and contact Governor Evers, contact the Department of Corrections contact their state legislators throughout the state and let them know what's going on right now is a human rights crisis that needs to be ended immediately. And we really need to demand that, to say what's going on right now is not acceptable. We really need to start demanding that they implement these common sense policy changes to reduce the prison population and put resources back into communities that have been most harmed by incarceration, so we can really start to build safer, stronger, and healthier communities by making smarter investments with public resources. So definitely direct engagement with elected officials, but also organized. Definitely people can get involved. We have several different task forces, ways to get involved. We have a structure with this campaign that definitely anyone that wants to get involved and, to show leadership, will just based in Wisconsin or even nationally, it would definitely be helpful for people to get involved nationally, put pressure on from outside of Wisconsin too, to let them know that people all across the country are looking at this and saying, this is really a stain on the reputation of Wisconsin nationally. So I think to have that national spotlight put on it is going to be really powerful as well.
All right, Mark, thank you. There you have it, the real news, just like the name say. I'm your host, Mance Musa. That's going to do it for us today. But you can find us here every Monday as we continue to rattle the bar for truth and justice. I want to thank our guest, Mark Rice, for joining me as we rattle the bars today. We ask that you continue to support the real news and rattling the bars, which you can do by clicking the donate button next to this video or by going to therealnews.com/donate. Because guess what? We really are the news.
Thank you so much for watching The Real News Network, where we lift up the voices, stories, and struggles that you care about most. And we need your help to keep doing this work. So please, tap your screen now, subscribe, and donate to The Real News Network. Solidarity forever.